Established over 100 years ago, Watkins Books is one of the world's oldest and leading independent bookshops specializing in esoterica. We have the widest selection of esoteric books in the UK, and our friendly and knowledgeable staff are here to assist you in a unique ambience of our shop. So come and visit us in the heart of London as we're open every day.
The Moore Show is supported by Mindscape, Paranormal and UFO Matrix magazines. Available for download on all major digital platforms.
If you like what you watch, then don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Twitter for the latest updates on The Moore Show. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel for new weekly television and radio shows.
The Moore Show is in partnership with Ozark Mountain Publishing, taking readers beyond the unexplained. The comments and views expressed on The Moore Show are those of the people that make them and do not necessarily reflect the view of Kevin Moore, The Moore Show, or this radio station and its affiliate or sponsors. This show is for entertainment purposes only.
Broadcasting from the UK and across the world online, you're now listening to the UK's only alternative late-night talk show, and I'm Kevin Moore. For the next hour, I'll be covering subjects that will open up your mind and provide you with information you may have never heard before. On today's show, I'm joined with Dr. Jamie Turndorf. Now, Dr. Jamie Turndorf, known worldwide as Dr. Love, or known to millions as Dr. Love through her website, AskDrLove.com, the web's first and immensely popular relationship advice site since 1995. Dr. Jamie Turndorf has been delighting readers and audiences for 3 decades. She is the author of the Hay House books, Kiss Your Fights Goodbye, Dr. Love's 10 Simple Steps to Calling Conflict and Rekindling Relationship, and her latest book, Love Never Dies, How to Reconnect and Make Peace with the Deceased. This latest book recounts the recent death of Dr. Jean Pin, her beloved husband of 27 years. She has discovered that relationships do not end in death, and that his miraculous manifestations, often in front of witnesses, have proven to her that there is life after death. Dr. Jamie Turndorf, welcome to the show.
I'm so happy to be with you.
Oh, it's great to have you on, and what a wonderful week it's been for you as well with book sales, and it's just been an incredible a few months. It must have been.
It's so true. It's an explosion, but people can feel the incredible power of my story and the implications for everyone. Yeah.
Sure. And just tell the audience just a bit about yourself as well.
I'm known worldwide as Dr. Love, having founded the web's first relationship advice site, Ask Dr. Love, in the early 90s. Actually, I had a premonition in the early 80s that I was going to be bringing relationship advice through computers, but I had no idea how this was going to happen since it was long before the internet was born. And then the day that the internet was invented, somebody said to me, "Have you heard about this new thing?" And I said, that's how I'm going to do it. And so even though I've been a therapist since 1983, I've been on the internet really for the last 20 years, being the first relationship advice site. So that's a good example of how we have visions of things long before we even know how we're going to do it.
Oh, absolutely. And would you say you've always been quite intuitive?
Yes, I was told by a psychic that I know that having been born 3 months early and having spent the first 3 months alone in a preemie nursery gave me the calling of connecting souls, because I didn't want to see other people suffering the pain of disconnection that I felt. So really my Dr. Love industry was born then.
Absolutely. And how long has it taken you to publish this story?
I published it pretty much very soon after my husband left his body. Do you want me to back up and tell you a little bit? Because the story is just so amazing, and I'm so, passionate to share it with everybody.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, well then, Let me go backwards then a little bit to when you was a younger girl, in a sense of the vision you had, or the
All right,
person
well,
that you would marry.
when I was a young girl, I actually had a premonition of the man that I was going to marry one day. I saw him, Kevin, completely fleshed out. Saw his face, saw everything. So I was just content to wait until he eventually appeared in my life. And he did appear on the first day of my freshman year at Vassar College. I had been shut out of all the intro sociology classes, and the secretary said, "Go ask Jean Pin, he's the department chair, see if he can find a seat for you in one of the closed classes." So I walked into his office and I had the most extraordinary, first and only out of body experience. I felt my soul shooting at high speed through a tunnel to the end of my life. And then I felt myself shooting back into my body. But before I came back into my body, I got this message: remember every aspect of this meeting, he's going to be everything to you one day. And then I forgot. And a couple of months after this extraordinary event, I learned that Jean had been, for most of his life, one of the most famous Jesuit priests in history. He taught at the Vatican. He was a radical feminist Jesuit priest. He founded a movement called liberation theology, designed to fight church oppression from within. And he actually launched to international fame when he publicly opposed the Catholic Church and the Pope because they were trying to block the legalization of divorce. And Jean was this radical feminist. He didn't want to see women trapped in marriages where they were being abused. So he fought on the grounds of liberation theology. The church should butt out of the private sector. And he won, and he changed the course of Italian history, got the divorce bill passed. Soon after, the Pope granted him the dispensation of his vows so he wouldn't be excommunicated. And then he was recruited by Vassar, which is where I met him there on that fateful first day of my freshman year. Now, the senior year at Vassar, I needed help with the statistical portion of my thesis. And I had heard that, among other things, Jean had founded the Vatican's first and only social research center because somebody just told me that he was a statistician. So I asked him, could you please help me with the statistics? And even though he wasn't my advisor, he cheerfully gave me his time and helped me. And within a few weeks, Kevin, we realized we were absolute soulmates. Despite our different cultures, backgrounds, religions, we were just twins separated at birth, just soulmates. Now, here's the crazy part. I was raised by two devout Jewish atheists, and the only religion my parents practiced was religiously hating each other. They taught me not to believe in God or the afterlife. I never read the Bible. I never went to synagogue or church. And Jean and I never discussed religion, at least not when he lived in a body. So we spent almost 28 years together, 27 years together, inseparable. We restored houses together. We wrote books together. We rejoiced in every moment we spent together. But then, in the last year of his life, we both started having premonitions that he was going to die of an accident. We just didn't know when or where. Now, on the day we left for our final vacation to Italy, I had a very bad feeling. Lightning struck our rose arbor and destroyed it. And then I saw about 50 black crows, and I got a bad feeling, but we went anyway. So here we are in Italy. We're sitting on the beach, and suddenly a bee swoops down and stings him at the exact location of Christ's stigmata. And I watch my beloved suffocate to death in front of my eyes. He just suffocates. So I go back to the hotel room, and I am hysterical, Kevin. I'm traumatized. He's been ripped from me. I'm shaking. I'm trembling. I'm crying. And the next thing I know, I feel his hand stroke the entire length of my spine. And I jump bolt upright because I know what I felt. I look over my shoulder. Nothing and no one was there, but he was there. And he has been with me ever since. And what he has done from the moment he left his body is offer astonishing and ongoing manifestations of his spirit presence, often in front of witnesses. And this has proven to me we don't die and our relationships aren't meant to end in death. So I've created a groundbreaking new, what I call trans-dimensional grief therapy method that totally diverges from the Western approach, which often leaves the bereaved at a greater loss, the Western approach being grieve, let go, and move on. But my method, by contrast, shows the bereaved how to say hello, not goodbye, without the assistance of a medium, a channeler, or a psychic. And then there's one more thing. As a shrink, I know millions of people worldwide harbor unfinished business with somebody who's passed. Now, Western grief therapy also offers us no way of making peace with the deceased. So my new dialoguing with the departed method offers the first vehicle in history for not only reconnecting, but also making peace with the deceased.
Wow. Yeah.
I know. So, and I broke Love Never Dies down into 3 parts, Kevin. The first part is my memoir. I pick up the story from the night I told you, where I feel his hand stroke my spine. Would you like me to tell you a couple of those stories?
I would, please, yes.
All right. Well, the first one happened when I came back from Italy. So here I am. I haven't slept the whole night, and I just come out of bed, and I actually hear Jean saying to me, Jamie, open the kitchen door. I want to show you something. So I open the door, and what do I see? I see a chipmunk sitting on the back step. And the chipmunk is sort of frozen in place. He's glazed, like he's not moving. He's in a trance. I know that this is odd. Then the next thing I see, the chipmunk begins to rip at his little face, the way Jean was ripping at the oxygen mask because the air wasn't getting in. So the chipmunk is mimicking Jean's bodily death. And I'm watching him struggling like this. And of course, tears are raining down my face as I see this. And finally, after about 20 minutes of this torment, I see the chipmunk visibly cough up a hunk of mucus, and he's in peace. And I knew Jean was telling me through this little chipmunk, I'm okay. Now, the next thing that happens is I have to fax Jean's death certificate to Verizon to take him off the account. And I had made many multi-page faxes throughout the day, no problem at all. But when I go to fax his death certificate, the cover letter faxes without a hitch, but then the machine refuses to fax his death certificate. I try again with his obituary. Same thing, the cover letter faxes without a hitch, but then the obit won't fax. I try 20, 30 times, it doesn't work. So the next day I go to the lawyer's office. I don't tell them why, I just say, could you fax these for me? And I'm waiting and waiting. About 25 minutes goes by. The secretaries all come out from the back crying. They say, Jamie, we tried and tried. Every time we try to fax the cover letter, it goes, but the obit and the death certificate won't go. He's trying to tell you he's not dead. So I go home, and again, I have to fax these 2 documents to another outlet, and it won't work again. So I stop and I say out loud to Jean, listen, Jean, I think you're trying to remind me that you're not gone. So if I promise to remember, will you allow this fax to go through in its entirety? I cancel the fax. I feel this tidal wave of love pouring into me, and I reissue the fax, and it goes through in its entirety. Now, I mean, this is happening to me now over and over again. I'm getting messages and signs all over the place. And strangers now are walking up to me, don't know me, didn't know him, don't know that I'm widowed, and they just walk up to me and say, your husband says, tell our story, and then they walk on. So now, one day, I'm in the closet, and I'm, so bereft, and I'm crying, and I keep thinking, I have to call my friend Anne. No, don't bother her, it's the middle of her workday, don't bother her. And after about a half hour of this, I hear the phone ring, and I pull myself up out of the closet, and I run to get the phone. It's Anne. She says to me, Jamie, did you call me? I say, no, Anne, I was crying in the closet, but I was thinking of calling you. She says, but Jamie, my phone rang, and your name and number appeared on the caller ID. Well, this obviously blew my mind, that he was somehow able to manipulate the electronics, let me know, I know you want to call Anne, I know you need to talk to her, I'll call her for you. So now a year later, I have a terrible cough, and I think I'm going to suffocate to death the way he did. And I out loud say to him, Jean, could you do that phone trick again with the caller ID? This time do it with my housekeeper, Donna. Call her and put my name and number on the caller ID. Kevin, 2 seconds later, my phone rings. And it's Donna. And she says, Jamie, did you just call? I say, no. She says, but my phone rang and your name and number appeared on the caller ID. So now I go to a writer's group, and it's headed up by a devout Jewish atheist named Gabe Davis. And I'm telling all the stories, these plus many others, and I tell Gabe the phone trick with the caller ID. So Gabe says, you know, Jamie, I sure would like to see that phone trick repeated. But this time I would like to see whether your phone actually shows a record of having been manipulated and, you know, just dialing out without your even using it. So I forget that Gabe asks. A month later, I go to the writers group, and I'm due to meet Gabe and his wife Robin for dinner, and I'm driving behind them. And all of a sudden, I feel this now familiar tidal wave of love pouring into me. And I know it's Jean. I look at the clock, and it says 4:58. I get to the restaurant, and I come out of the car, and Gabe runs up to me, and he says, Jamie, you won't believe what happened. I said, what happened, Gabe? He says, at 4:58, my cell phone rang. I looked at the caller ID, and in your name and number appeared. He said, I picked up the call, and a man's voice said, is Jamie there? Is Jamie there? He said the voice had an accent and it extended the syllable there. Well, Jean had a French accent and he did extend that syllable. It would sound there. He said it wasn't a real call. The voice just faded away. The call never clicked off. He said, Jamie, go get your phone and see if it dialed me. So I dig into the bottom of my purse, and what do I find? 4:58. My phone that I hadn't used all day had dialed Gabe. So the point here is all these over-the manifestations that my husband continues to offer are being done because he asked me to tell our story. These manifestations are for you and for everybody watching, because as he told me after he left his body, Jamie, let our love shine like a torch that lights the path for others. So our story is meant to let you know and to let everybody watching know your loved ones are here with you too. They're just waiting for you to open the door of your heart to them. So Kevin, after I get all my stories shared, then in part 2 of Love Never Dies, I go on to help you overcome any false beliefs or religious teachings that might prevent you from reconnecting. And I talk about even how it's possible to communicate with those in spirit. Now, this is so important. The first obstacle that most everyone faces to reconnecting with loved ones in spirit is the religious indoctrination, the Christian teaching that says, you know, once your loved ones are in heaven, you are not going to hear from them again, and you just have to wait to die, and you enter heaven, and then you can reconnect. So the first thing that we need to overcome is this false belief. Now, here's how I realized this is a false belief. My first night back from Italy, I heard Jean speaking to me, and he was quoting something I did not recognize. The next day, I went to his priest, and I told him, Jean's been talking to me, and he's quoting something, I don't know what it is. The priest raises his brow in obvious skepticism, thinking, this babe has really rounded the bend. But then when I told him what Jean was saying, the priest blanched. He crossed himself and he said, Dear God, Jamie, at first I didn't believe that Jean was talking to you, but I do now. The priest told me that I was quoting an obscure biblical passage from the Communion of Saints. Like I knew. I never read the Bible, as I said. I never went to church. Jean and I didn't discuss religion. So it took me 1 year to understand why Jean chose to quote that and only that passage to me. Remember, he was a religious pioneer in life, and he continues to be in the afterlife. The Communion of Saints says that our loved ones in spirit are one with or in communion with God and the saints. And since we're supposed to stay in communion and communication with God and the saints, this means that the Bible is telling us we're supposed to stay in communion and communication with our loved ones in spirit because they are one with God and the saints. So the point is, Jean is telling us what we've been told about the afterlife is dead wrong, if you'll pardon my pun. We are not meant to live in an emotional wasteland, separated from those we love, waiting until we die and we enter heaven, because heaven is a state, not a place. Heaven is all around us. Heaven is here and now. This means we are supposed to reconnect now. So, what's very, very interesting is And there, I actually tell this story about how I know this. This is a huge misconception that we're supposed to just sort of say goodbye and that's it. I went back to talk to Jean's priest, and I said to him, you know, Jean continues to speak to me, right? The priest says to me, Jamie, once he's in heaven, you will not hear from him anymore. So all day, this is bugging me. It's bugging me. I can't believe how it's annoying me. And finally, that night, I'm set to run a group. I put the circle. Everybody in the group is late except one woman. Her name was Ashley. And she did not know me, didn't know Jean, didn't know I was widowed. It was her first group. So we're in my office. She's sitting in the group room. The door is closed. When all of a sudden I hear the chime of my front door, because I have a burglar alarm, so that says the front door has opened. Then I hear loud pounding footsteps. And then I hear the footsteps stop in my waiting room. So I say to Ashley, gee, I wonder if somebody got his or her time wrong and is coming into the waiting room thinking he has an individual session. Now I hear the footsteps pounding and leaving, and then I hear the chime again. So I jump up and I run to the front door. Now, mind you, Kevin, I have a really long driveway. So the parking area is so far down the driveway, whoever it was could not have walked down the driveway and gone to his car without my seeing him. So I get to the front door. 2 seconds later, there is nobody there. So I come back and I say to Ashley, there's nobody there. And she says, it was a spirit. So that was Jean's answer to the, once I'm in heaven, you won't hear from me anymore. So
I mean, this is just an incredible story, and
I
what I love
know.
about it, right, is the validations as well, and there's lots and lots of evidence here. Have you ever gone to see a medium as well, or mediums in a sense?
No, because it turns out this is one of the points that I make in Love Never Dies. We all have the ability to tune into spirit. I never knew that I could do it, and now I do it all the time, routinely. So basically, I explain this is the second part of part two. How can we do this without a medium, a channeler, or a psychic? What we're talking about here is energetic communication. We all energetically communicate all the time. We're born with this innate ability. We just haven't cultivated our ability to tune to what I call the spirit channel. So, you know, think about it. Drivers, when you park at a light, you look over at the driver in the neighboring car. Doesn't that other driver always turn back and look at you, sensing the energetic frequency of your gaze? Twins know the other's in trouble, even if they live at opposite ends of the world. Mothers sense when their babies are in trouble. Close couples know what the other is thinking. This is all energetic communication. So basically, in Love Never Dies, in part three, I show you how to learn how to turn your receiver in your brain to this spirit channel so that you can begin to just send and receive energetic signals. And you know what's interesting is many prominent figures throughout history, from Socrates to Helen Keller, have reported having personal contacts with spirits. They didn't go to mediums. Even Thomas Edison said in Scientific American that it's reasonable to conclude that those who have left the earth plane would like to communicate with those that have left. And he said that it was possible to construct an apparatus that would be so delicate that if there are personalities in another existence or sphere that want to get in touch with us, that the apparatus would enable them to communicate. And he was actually working on this in 1931. And Albert Einstein, in his introduction to Upton Sinclair's book on telepathy called Mental Radio, he said science really needs to take this phenomenon more seriously. Sigmund Freud in 1921 said, if I had my life to live over again, I would devote myself to psychic research rather than psychoanalysis. Even Carl Jung said the same. It's the same thing. So my message here is, look, I wasn't a medium, and then I discovered I not only hear Jean, I hear all the spirits. So we don't reconnect because we've been told it's not possible. And what our story is showing you is it is possible. And this leads to part three, where I show you how to establish your own reconnection without the assistance of a channeler, a medium, or a psychic. And what's so exciting about this is people all over the world are calling me on Hay House Radio. I do a show there, Love Never Dies, every Tuesday, 9 a.m. Pacific time. They call me, they're writing me, weeping. Suddenly the door is wide open because we know it's possible. So
Right.
the
Well,
first thing
well, let me
that
just
I do
let me
in
just
part three is I show you how to create your own state of receptivity. Because as Jean said to me, Jamie, the noise of the day drowns me out. So anytime you want to hear me, come to the bed and be still and quiet. And afterwards, my friend Anne, the one who he called, put my name and number on the caller ID, Anne said, the Bible says, be still and know that I am God. So we don't live in a world in which we're very still and quiet. So I give you lots of exercises in Love Never Dies for heightening your ability to be still and quiet, sit in silence, turn the TV off, turn the music off. Then I also show you some breathing exercises that Jean taught me because spirit is really born on the breath. I also show you how to surrender to all your emotional states without getting too upset because we have to walk a tightrope. If we're too upset, it blocks the sending and receiving of energetic signals. But we need to also be open.
Okay.
Yes?
Okay. No, I just wanted to ask you there as well. I mean, yeah, absolutely. I'm one as well who believes we can all speak to spirit, and I've interviewed a number of mediums and a number of channelers, and all the good mediums and channelers always do say that we all have the ability ourselves to do this.
Yep.
Okay.
Absolutely, absolutely. And basically, I'm a really good spokesperson for this because I'm a Western shrink. I'm a doctor. I was raised an atheist, and I am living proof that we all have the capacity to send and receive energetic signals and to dialogue with our loved ones in spirit.
But
So I also
but
show you how to use what I call twilight states, which is the moment right before you fall asleep or the moment you just wake up. And I show you I have some exercises for how to use nature to help you tune to the spirit channel.
yeah.
Then I have, and this is really fun, Kevin, these exercises for opening your five senses. Because remember, spirit is pure energy. And so they are able to energetically send signals to all your senses. So the more your sensory receiver is turned on, the easier it's going to be for you to perceive the signs that are being sent your way. Now, speaking of signs, this is the second step for creating your own reconnection. You must recognize the signs. Now, so often people will say to me, I'm not getting any signs. I hear this hundreds of times a day. But then as I lay out in Love Never Dies, I say, look at all the signs here of spirit presence. And the next thing I know, I'm hearing them say, oh, this happened and that happened and this. So remember, freed from the human vessel, they are able to influence the material world in infinite ways, through sounds, animals behaving oddly, like the chipmunk, the weird sensations that they instill in us, a sense of draft or temperature changes, chills and goose flesh, and also the symbolic communications, butterflies. And a very common way that they offer us signs is by manifesting coins that were minted on the year that was significant to you. For example, I have a patient named Kyla, and it's the anniversary week of my husband's bodily death. And I say to her, this is the week he left his body, and I often find coins minted on the same year that he left his body. Now, Kyla blinks, and she says to me, oh my goodness, Jamie, I forgot. I was in my bedroom last week. My cowboy boots were off, and they were in the middle of the room, when suddenly I saw a coin careening through space. From the roof, like the ceiling down, it lands in my boot, and I get this message that the coin is for you. She says, and I didn't take it out. So she takes the boot off, tips it over, hands me the coin, and I hear Jean saying to me at this moment, you'll see, get your glasses. It was minted the year I left my body. Sure enough, it was. Wild, right?
That's pretty amazing.
I know.
I think a lot of this stuff as well. I think because you trust the voices coming into your head and you trust the message. I think that's half the battle. I think a lot of people just wouldn't trust that that's an authentic way of communicating, even though.
I'm glad you said that because, it's interesting. I got a call right after I did the Coast to Coast show where Love Never Dies became an instant overnight bestseller and sold out on Amazon. I get a call from a woman in New York City, and she's crying in gratitude. And she says, I have to tell you, the fact that you came out and told your story, and you're a respected therapist, and a known public figure. And she said, I thought I was crazy. I didn't tell anybody. I didn't trust anything that was happening to me. But when I listened to you, I realized I'm not crazy, and I have to trust because I'm experiencing the same thing you describe.
Yeah. I mean, once you gain that trust, you open up all sorts of lost knowledge in a sense, and, they want you to talk to them.
Absolutely. Now, this is where we get into the third part of the book, where I take you to a completely different place. And Reed Tracy, the CEO of Hay House, said, Jamie, we have never seen anything like what you're doing here in Love Never Dies, because I show you how you can not only just be open to signs, but I show you how you can dialogue back and forth to reconnect, to obtain guidance, and most especially to heal any unfinished business and make peace. So the thing is, we know spirits dialogue with us in many, many ways. So in addition to communicating with us and dialoguing with us through dreams and through mind melding and thought induction, and they also, communicate through signs. But the thing is, signs are a static form of communication. They're just like dropping a sign on us, we see it. But what I explain is that you can actually engage in a back and forth communication using the signs as what I call earthly props. So may I give you an example of what I'm talking about?
Please.
Okay, so here's an example of the difference between static signs versus back and forth communication with the help of signs and earthly props. This year, on the anniversary week of Jean's bodily death, I went to my chiropractor. Nobody was in the office, and Teresa was at the reception desk. We're alone in the office, and I say to her, I'm going to be doing my first public talk about Love Never Dies. This is the anniversary week of Jean's bodily death. At that moment, Kevin, I smell gardenias. Now, I do not say a word to Teresa, and then suddenly Teresa says to me, do you smell gardenias? So I said, Teresa, that's called the scent of sanctity. Jean is giving us both a sign at the same time that he's here. Now, the next day, I saw a patient named Regina who desperately needs to reconnect with her sister in spirit. So I told her the story about the scent of gardenias. And at that moment, I heard Jean saying to me, I wish I could give you a bouquet of roses like I always did every week. Now, he was dialoguing with me by inducing that thought in my mind. But at this moment, Regina sits up abruptly and she says, Jamie, do you smell roses? So in this beautifully elegant manifestation, he put that thought and scent in her mind and in her senses to facilitate a back and forth dialogue between us. So he let me know, Jamie, I heard you and you heard me correctly. And at the same time, he's bolstering her confidence in her ability to hear spirit so that she could reconnect with her sister. Now, let me give you another example of how we dialogue with spirit and how we can dialogue with spirit using people who are what I call open vessels. Open vessels are anybody who's willing to be used in the service of love. The very young, the very old, the sick, the disabled, the mentally ill. So my friend Anne was taking me to dinner. I say out loud, Jean, it feels like you're coming home to me. She says when she walks in the door, honey, I'm home. Now, he heard me say, it feels like you're coming home to me because I'm saying she allows us to speak back and forth using her as an intercessor. She walks in the door and says, honey, I'm home. She claps a hand over her mouth and says, I'm so mortified to make such a gauche joke. I said, no, that was not a gauche joke. You were being used by Jean as an open vessel to let me know I heard what you said about coming home to you, and honey, I'm home was my way of saying it through Anne, who's the open vessel. Now we're in the restaurant. Anne is stoical. She wouldn't cry if her kid was run over by a bus. Suddenly, I see a funny look come over her face. She has like a glazed expression. She looks like the chipmunk looked. Now I see tears in her eyes. And the next thing I know, she says, you look so beautiful tonight. I wish I had a camera. So that is an example of him using her as an open vessel to say to me the exact words that Jean used to say to me privately. He would get tears in his eyes and say, you look so beautiful tonight. I wish I had a camera. Now, this week, I had the most extraordinary example of a combination of how Jean dialogues with me and how your loved ones dialogue with you through a man who is an open vessel, and by using what I call earthly props, which are usually electronic devices because their energy can easily interrupt electronic devices. So after I did the show on Coast to Coast, a man named J.C. Gold wrote to me telling me it was the most amazing interview. It just was incredible. And he said that he does illustrations of beings in spirit and also people who walk the earth. And he just channels it. And the next thing you know, he's done a drawing of somebody who's a part of your life that you need to connect with. And he said to me that he knew Jean was coming through him. And the first thing that happened was he tried to email me repeatedly. And just like, remember, my fax wouldn't go through, his emails wouldn't go through. And then he heard Jean say, treat her gently. Now, on Monday of this week, Kevin, I had the most extraordinary confirmation of Jean dialoguing with me through this open vessel and through the earthly prop of his computer. The guy says to me, Jamie, you will not believe what happened to me this morning, and my brains are exploding from it. I've never experienced anything like it. He said, I was about to write you. My hands were in my lap. I was not touching my computer when suddenly my computer screen was filled with a menu of about 1,000 photos. My wife is a professional photographer, he says. And I hear Jean saying, whispering in my ear, send Jamie the peach rose. And he opened a photo of his wife's peach rose from her collection of professional photos. And the man says, J.C. Gold tells me, my hand wasn't even on the computer. Now, here's what's so incredible. Jean gave me roses every week, but they were always peach-colored roses, okay? Mind-blowing.
Yeah.
Mind-blowing. And the day before, Kevin, I told this guy, when he said, Jean wants you to know your time is now, I said, Jean always told me the cream rises to the top. So Kevin, J.C. Gold said when he looked at the photo that Jean opened and read the caption, the name of the photo was, it was called Peaches and Cream. Crazy, right?
That's incredible.
I know. So obviously, it is beyond our ability to understand. We know we're in the presence of the divine. So, I mean, I have many examples of how we are able to dialogue with our loved ones through earthly props, through open vessels. Do you want another one? Do we have time?
We do, and I'm getting the feeling right now that he's telling me to tell you to send him your love. Send Jamie my love. That's
You
what. Sorry.
got that right.
Yeah, send Jamie my love. That's the
Now,
feeling
you
I
know
just
how
got.
attuned you are, Kevin? Because the example that I was going to give you is exactly that. I'm blown away because you are so in tune with spirit. This was the example I was going to give you. Right after he left his body, everybody says to me, Jamie, you're glowing. So I'm sitting in my living room and I say, Jean, how can they say I'm glowing? Because I'm bawling all the time and I'm miserable. And he says to me, brides glow, Jamie, and we're newlyweds in the new spiritual phase of our relationship. At this moment, I get an email. Remember, earthly props, electronics. An email is coming through from a disabled man who I don't know, who had written to me a few weeks before, seeing that I had endorsed a mattress and asking me if I truly liked the mattress. And at the time I had written to him and said, I love the mattress, but I can't speak to you. My husband just died. So on this night that I hear my husband say, we're newlyweds in the new spiritual phase of our relationship, this man writes to me again. And all he says to me is, I thought you would like to see a photo of my beloved bird named Jamie. So Kevin, I open up the attachment and there's a bird named Jamie. Now, Jean and I had a bird and we loved birds, but this is what blew my mind. Underneath that photo was a second attachment. I open it, Kevin, and what is it a picture of? It's a picture of the Arc de Triomphe in Paris. Where did Jean and I go on our honeymoon? Paris. And where did our hotel overlook? The Arc de Triomphe. So he was giving me this communication through this earthly prop, this electronic email, saying, we're newlyweds. Here's Paris. Here's the Arc de Triomphe. So I immediately write this man back and I say to him, do you know why you sent this to me? And I never heard from him again. So I was convinced that when spirit moves through these earthly props, that they just do these miraculous things. I'm not even convinced the man existed at all. So, but the point here is we can dialogue for any purpose. If someone was ripped from you due to a sudden illness or accidental death, you were robbed of the chance to say goodbye. So you at least get to reconnect and have that closure. If you're a child and you lost a parent, you need to reconnect and stay connected. If you're a parent who's lost a child, you need to reconnect and stay connected. And they are here to support us, to be our spirit guides, to help us as we travel down this bumpy road called life, to give us guidance. But now here's the most amazing part of Love Never Dies. What if you have unfinished business with someone who's in spirit? So I show you how you can reconnect and dialogue. So I show you how to do a specific meditation, and then we dialogue by writing, speaking out loud. I show you how to use a tape recorder. I give you different techniques for doing so. But this is what is so reassuring. Sometimes, and very often, you have to wait until your loved one or your hated one has left his or her body in order to work it out, because in spirit form, they're more evolved and they can now see how they've screwed up where they didn't realize when they lived in a body. And I learned this the first week after Jean left his body. I went to the garage and Debbie was at the desk. I didn't know them because Jean did the car thing. So I introduced myself. I say, Jean died of a bee sting and I'm doing the car thing. So she says, I'm a widow too. That's all she had to say. And the next thing I know, I hear her husband pounding down my door, saying to her, please, please tell her, don't make the same mistake that I did with our son, because she's now creating the same power struggle that I did. So that was my first clue. Whoa, they understand. And she confirmed this is exactly what was happening. But he understood only now that he was out of his body. Now, there's more. They need us to help them evolve spiritually. They need us to work it out with them because otherwise they're stuck. Now, how do I know this? It was Good Friday, the first Good Friday after Jean left his body, and I heard him saying to me that I should go to Lainey's place. She's a bird breeder. She had tried to help me save our little canary, and we couldn't. I didn't know Lainey, didn't know her story. I just knew that she tried to help me save our bird. The minute I walked in the door, she points out this Gouldian finch that is sitting on the perch, all slumped over and looking very bad. She says to me, this finch is on the edge of death. It hasn't eaten for 2 days, and it's so little, if it doesn't eat, it's going to die. So I say to her, may I try to help the little bird? So she says to me, okay. So I go over the cage and I press my nose against the bars. Now, normally a bird would be upset. This little bird was not upset. I say to the bird, please go down to your seed bowl and eat your seeds. Now, you see, that was me energetically communicating. Birds don't speak English. I said it out loud so she would know what I was saying. The bird got the message, immediately went down to his seed bowl and started scarfing up seeds like a little vacuum. The more the bird ate, the more the bird got energy. It's now chirping and jumping around. At this moment, I hear a spirit speaking, and it sounds like it's Lainey's mother. Now, I don't know, is her mother alive, not alive? The mother says, I'm sorry I was such a weakling and I didn't protect you from him. I say this to Lainey and she says, oh my gosh, my mother always said that she was a weakling. That was her word. Now I see the bird looking upset. He's craning his neck up and he's not eating again. And I realized the bird must have become ill because it was sensing an energetic frequency, a spirit, around Lainey, and it was making the bird sick. I tell the bird, go back to your seeds, ignore it, I'm here, I'll help Lainey. The bird goes back to eating. Now I feel my eyes being pulled to this purple witching ball on the ceiling. Remember, they will move us through clairsentience to look at certain things. That's another way that they'll put a thought in our mind. So I wonder, did I give this to her? I own one just like it. Did I give it? Her father was making me look at this so that I would call it to her attention. She says, no, you didn't give it to me. I bought it. for protection. Now her father says, tell her she does not need protection from me. I can't hurt her anymore. And what I am begging her to do is confront me for having sexually molested her. She doesn't need to forgive me, but she must confront me because I want to make peace with her and I need to own up to what I did. And that's where I realized that we often have to wait until they leave their bodies in order to work it out. Now, here is the coolest part of all. And this is my own healing that I'm going to tell you about. We all know our purpose on earth is to perfect our ability to love ourselves and others. And obviously we can't love others if we don't first love ourselves, because this life is really our love lab. Now, I'm living proof of the dilemma of how do you love yourself when you were raised in a really dysfunctional, abusive family. I was beaten physically and verbally, and I continued my entire life to hear very mean voices in my head. Now, even though Jean was so loving to me and so surrounding to me, there was a limitation. Somehow he would say to me, you just don't love yourself properly, and I'm frustrated because my love for you doesn't fully enter you. After he leaves his body, Kevin, I go to my professional group in the city and I bemoan the fact that I can't get these mean voices to go away. My professional group members say, yell louder, tell him to shut the F up. It's not working, I say. I go home and Jean appears to me as a golden light. I am surrounded in that tidal wave of love. He takes my face in his hands. He turns my face to him and the light. And all he says is, listen, listen, listen. And what he was saying was, allow my love to fully enter you, my love for you to become your self-love. And I felt that tidal wave of love now pouring into me, and I discovered for the first time in my life true self-love. And I realized that it was only when he had left his body and he was freed from the vessel of his body that the energetic frequency of all his love could now enter me unimpeded and heal me. And so our fast track to self-love is to reconnect with our loved ones in spirit. This way, we can allow their love for us to heal every corner of our soul, our hearts, our minds, our bodies, our spirit. And then now we can bring this endless self-love to the world. And this is what Love Never Dies is about.
Sure. I mean, you've covered some very powerful things there, but I mean, our loved ones, I mean, they wouldn't want us to grieve for too long once they've passed, would you say?
No, so here's the thing. Reconnecting instantly helps us transform our grief to joy. Because when you say, wow, no, I must grieve the loss of you in physical form, but I'm going to reclaim our life together in spirit form, you are not sad anymore. The best example I have of this is a mom who came to me. She was grieving endlessly for her daughter who died in a car crash. It had been 10 years. She said, I'm mad at my daughter. I'm mad at God. I used to be a devout Catholic. Now I hate everyone and I'm mad. I said, don't you understand? If you would reconnect with your daughter in spirit form, you would not be sad anymore. At that moment, her daughter appears to me and shows me her teeth, of all things, perfect white teeth, thought induction. I say to the mother, excuse me, your daughter is showing me white teeth. The mother says to me, are you kidding me? In her bodily form, she was ashamed of only one thing, her teeth. They were all black and crooked. So here her daughter is coming through and saying, I'm here and I'm healed in my spirit body. You'd think that would be enough proof for the mother, but the next week the mother comes back and she's still mad. At this moment, the daughter says, tell my mother about Padre Pio. So I say, excuse me, your daughter wants me to mention Padre Pio. Kevin, the mother leaps up off the couch, lands in the middle of my office. Why did you say Padre Pio? I said, she asked me to. She starts to cry now. She says, my daughter's favorite saint was Padre Pio. She talked about him morning, noon, and night. I feel her presence now. The mother instantly reconnects with her daughter and her grief is gone. And I don't see her anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right, because she's come and she's
He's
now healed.
reconnected.
Yeah, reconnected, that's right.
And we have to accept, yes, we're grieving the body, but I can't tell you the peace and the healing that comes from reconnecting with your loved ones in spirit form.
Yeah. And I mean, just out of curiosity as well, how many times do you think of Jean? I mean, how many times does he enter your thoughts in a daytime?
It's not even a matter of entering my thoughts, because remember now, when he entered my DNA, his love is inside me. It's a very mystical thing. He's just with me all the time.
That's a very beautiful way of putting it. I think you've said some fantastic things there, things that actually I thought, whoa, hang on a minute, I've not heard of that before. That's kind of
That's
a little bit
interesting, right?
mind-bending.
Because I know your Mira Kelly was on my Ask Dr. Love radio show, and she said, I've never heard what you said before. And believe me, I haven't read this. This is straight from Jean.
Right, yes, because that's a question I was going to ask you earlier on. I mean, in search of knowledge and stuff, have you read much spiritual books? Or
Never.
no, no.
That's what's so amazing. I didn't discuss religion with him, never went to church, never read the Bible, never read any spiritual or New Age books. Everything I'm sharing you is straight from Jean.
And that just like a science experiment, you're all saying the same thing. It's all repeatable.
There you go.
Yeah, yeah. Just very briefly, because obviously we've covered so much here as well. Trans-dimensional grief therapy. Can you just briefly touch on that so that the audience can sort of maybe get a better understanding of how they could approach you to get involved in that?
All right, so the best way, read Love Never Dies, because I literally spell out how you're going to create a state of receptivity, how you're going to recognize the signs, and how you can establish your own dialogue to whatever end you require, including making peace if necessary. I give you the dialoguing exercises, I give you the meditation, the breathing, I give you all of it. And then, if you want to reach out to me more, you can always call me, on Hay House Radio. You can join my love club, where I'm actually doing small groups and I sort of help you practice. What I'm doing now that is really extraordinary on Hay House Radio is I'm actually doing live dialoguing on air. This was my first week that I did it on Tuesday.
Oh,
It's in the
wow.
archives, where we are literally, I put everybody listening worldwide in this trance, and we did the meditation for making contact, and then people just called me one after another, and we dialogued with their loved ones in spirit. It was absolutely beautiful. And so sometimes you might need me to just help you get started, so I'm your little training wheel. And then you're off and running and you have your own dialogue going. And that is what's transdimensional, because the Western approach is, oh, you've got to let go and you got to do this in 6 months. I'm saying that's all garbage. What you've been told, what our Western approach is it's just garbage. So the transdimensional approach is reconnect, stay connected.
Right,
And
okay.
paradoxically, this is the way to not only transform your grief to joy, but to actually get back into your life, because you're not grieving constantly.
Yeah. And what would you say is the most important message of your book?
That it is, heaven is a state, not a place. Heaven is all around us. Heaven is here and now. What we've been told about the afterlife is dead wrong. You are not meant to live in an emotional wasteland, separated from those you love, waiting until you die and enter heaven to reconnect with them. Heaven is all around you. Death is an illusion. There's a very thin veil between the realm where we are and the realm where they are. The veil is thinner than you can ever imagine. They're all right here, so reconnect now. And, if needed, make peace.
Well, Dr. Jamie Turndorf, thank you so much for joining us today.
So wonderful being with you. You were just the best interviewer. You totally get this on a very deep and visceral level.
Thank you. Well, we've come to an end on tonight's show. Don't forget that you can listen and watch all our past interviews on the More Show's official YouTube channel, and remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel for new daily shows. You may also find out more on all past and upcoming guests via themoreshow.co.uk, and do like us on Facebook and Twitter for the latest updates. So until next time, be safe.